Hello everyone, welcome to KALAM's answer writing session for the day. So today we have a fairly simple question to discuss. I've opened up the question yesterday itself. It was on the Chief of Defense Staff. So why was this question asked? This question was asked because India has set up a Chief of Defense Staff post, which is basically above the three services of Army, Navy and Air Force, and it is going to coordinate with the government as such. So it is basically a 4-star general, and it has certain characteristics. It also handles the procurement, and it will push forward the indigenization and so on. So all these things have come up in the article, and then they have talked about the reasons why we need a CDS, if we need a CDS. Also, they have also talked about the problems with the previous structure. Before CDS, there used to be a Chief of Staff committee in which all the three service chiefs used to be there, and then the senior most person would man the post, would chair the post, and this was also rotated. The post was rotated between the three service chiefs. But this Chief of Staff committee has had several problems, because of which we had to ultimately push forward to CDS. In addition to this, there were also several committees like Kargil Review Committee, and then there was Naresh Chandra Committee, and I also think it was Shekatkar Committee. All these three committees have in some form gave a recommendation to the CDS, while Kargil Review Committee basically gave the actual structure and the position and the powers under CDS and so on. So these are all the things that that have been discussed in several articles that have come up in recent times. So based on that, we see that it is an important question, and we have framed a question on the same. And I call it a simple question because you don't have to think much in terms of evolving a subheading, because it is strictly asking you few things, and we will evolve the structure as we will see the structure of introduction, body and conclusion. Okay, so before I do that, what are the prerequisites when we handle an internal security question? Usually we try to put up a diagram, and using that diagram, in case it is a question on maritime security, we draw the maritime border. In case it is a question with Pakistan or China and so on, we can draw the borders and show them the different aspects of the same thing. So diagram is one important thing that you have to keep in mind when you talk about security. And the second thing you have to keep in mind is the usage of reports. There are several committee reports, and then you have a report on defense procurement, Dhirendra Singh committee, and then recently there is Shakatkar committee, which wanted to improve the teeth to tail ratio of the army and so on. There are several reports reported in relation to defense. All of these things can be talked about. Okay, so these are the basic prerequisites when we handle an internal security based question. Okay, now I'll move forward. I'll read the question out for you all. I have done that yesterday, so I'm going to read out the question out for you all briefly, and then I'll convert the question into the subheadings. Okay, let's see what happens. Complex administrative problems among the Indian Armed Forces necessitated the creation of CDS post. Discuss. So this is basically the first part of my answer. There are problems in the Indian Armed Forces, and because of this we are moving forward with the Chief of Defense Staff post. That is what he is asking you to talk about. Also throw a light on the major challenges that CDS has to face and the needed way out for the same thing. Okay, so I definitely have to talk about the measures or the way out, because that has been clearly asked. The measures and the way out has been clearly asked, but before doing that, he's asking me to talk about the challenges CDS is facing. CDS का post तो बना दिए हैं, but what are the challenges this CDS faces? For example, how does he push indigenization? Also, if he comes from the army, how will he make sure that he takes into account the interests of Navy and Air Force? Will he be sure that he will not be biased? Okay, and among the army, people usually are very favorable to infantry. Will he be above all these kinds of biases? So these are the challenges that CDS are facing. So he is asking me to talk about the challenges. This is the second thing, and the first thing we have to talk about is this part. There are problems in the armed forces problems which necessitated CDS. So these are the three broad headings that I'm going to talk about. Okay, so the first thing is the establishment of a scenario in which there are problems with the previous structure, and because of this we have set up a position called CDS, but this CDS itself has certain challenges that it has to face, and in order to in order to overcome these challenges, there are certain measures that he has to take. So this is a complete holistic way of addressing the question that has been asked. Now let's see what else can be put up. Okay, CDS is basically a technical post, so be a technical point, because it is a technical concept. There are certain facts associated with it, right? He is a 4-star general. He takes up the procurement processes, but he does not have powers over fighter crafts and warships. That is the second point about CDS. Also, after he demits the office, he cannot take up any government employment. Also, after he demits the office, he cannot take up any employment under the private sector without the permission of the government. And even if he takes the permission of the government, he has to do it after 5 years after he demits the office. So there are several technicalities related to the CDS post. So it would be really nice if you talk about CDS and certain facts related to it, and you have to do this in diagram format, so that the examiner knows that you have good factual depth about CDS and you're not talking in the air. And you have to talk about this only briefly, because you are just adding value to your answer, while these things have been directly asked. These 3 parts have been directly asked by the question, so we will address them comprehensively. But ye jo hai, the facts of CDS, it is only to add value to your answer. It is only to add that 1 or 0.5 marks that we would like to add in our answers. Okay, so the conclusion is 1 or 2 line conclusion, which is going to be nice, neither too specific nor too generic. How do you start with the introduction? One way to start about the introduction is to talk about the current affairs event. India has come up with the Chief of Defence Staff post, which basically acts as a coordinator between the 3 services of the 3 armed services, and also coordinates between these armed services and the civilian government. So that is one good way of introducing your answer, because you are giving the essence of CDS. What else can be done? You can also talk about the Chief of Staff Committee and how it has lapsed into poor functioning, because of which we have come up with CDS. How do you do that? You do that by talking about in the introduction in the following way. The Chief of Staff Committee, which was supposed to coordinate the communication between the 3 services as well as between the services and the government, has not been functioning up to the mark. In this context, the Chief of Defence Staff post has been come up. So there are 2 ways of introducing your answer. Be very simple in your introduction, but be very specific. Also try to put up a fact, try to put up the essence of what you're trying to talk about, so that the examiner gets hooked to your answer. Okay, so this is a good introduction body conclusion format that we have evolved. We will see what this person does. We will see how he handles the question as such. Let's move forward. So Indian government has set up the post of CDS as the coordinator of all the 3 services and the government. Okay, so this is a good introduction. This is a decent introduction for a 10 marker, in which you have 7 minutes to address. So 20-30 seconds you finish this off, you immediately move forward to write the rest of the subheadings. He probably started with a very simple introduction without loading it too much in terms of facts or content, because he has 4 subheadings to address. 3 subheading to usne पूछ लिया है. Starting from here, we have 3 subheadings which they have asked, and this I'm already doing to add value to the answer. So why should I spend too much time on introduction? I'll spend about 2 or 3 lines in the introduction, give a brief introduction. I'll directly jump into my answer, and then I'll impress the examiner with my answer. That is what he thought. Let's see if he's successful. Chief of Defence Staff, he's a 4-star general, good fact. Advises on nuclear matters, okay. Takes decision on procurement except for warships, etc. So this is a good point, because he has pointed out certain exceptions. This shows that his reading is extensive. Also he's talking about, it has been about the committees which have recommended it. The Kargil Review Committee, the Naresh Chandra Committee, and then the Shekatkar Committee report also, in a manner of speaking, supported the institution of Chief of Defence Staff. So he basically has given out certain good points. In order to add to this, I gave you all other points, right? He cannot take up any office after he demits his office. He cannot take up any government post, neither can he take up any private post within 5 years, and so on. So there are several other technical points which I have pointed out, but you don't have to write all of them, because 4 or 5 good points is enough, because this has to be only briefly addressed. Okay, so that part has been done. We will move forward and directly jump into the answer. So he's mimicking the nature of the question. He has picked up this sentence directly from the question. Complex administrative problems have necessitated CDS. So what does he have to establish in this particular part of this subheading? He has to show me the complex administrative problems and then establish a link between having these problems and instituting the position of CDS. Ineffective communication between civilian government and the services. This is one reason why we have to have CDS. Also, you have turf war between the three services, and even within the army there is domination of infantry. There are problems with the services, there is turf war between these three services, and even if you take one of these services, that is the army, inside army itself there are certain problems as pointed out by this answer, like there is domination of infantry and so on. Okay, so there are large delays in procurement of weapons and there are cost overruns, etc. So this is another administrative problem. And then what else has it have? Ineffectiveness of the chief of staff committee. So this is a good point. He's basically telling you by establishing the history of this post. The CDS has been recommended since the Kargil review committee, but then in addition to that, he's telling me that there was chief of staff's committee which broadly had good amount of powers, but it was not functioning well because of several reasons, which is why we have CDS. Okay, now let's see if he establishes the problems in chief of staff's committee, because it creates a clear chain of logic. What does he do? He says that the chief of staff committee communicated with the Department of Defense only through files. So there was no proper coordination between this chief of staff committee on one side and through file and the government department on the other side. So that is one other administrative problem that has been pointed out. Let's see what he has next. Poor management of theater commands. India has one theater command, that is Andaman Nicobar command. I want you all to go back and Google if China has theater commands, or does it have only theater commands and so on, or does it have integrated commands. I want you all to Google this. This is good for your knowledge. Okay, so these are the problems, and he has established a few problems, about 5 or 6 problems. He has clearly told me that there are these have led to the creation of the CDS post. What else can be done? Major challenges of the current CDS. Now that he has talked about the problems and established the need for CDS, now he is moving forward by talking about the problems which the current CDS will face. One, he has to avoid wasteful expenditure, which is a generic point. He may be biased towards army because he hails from the army. So this is a good point. This is a technical point. It has concept in it. Taking forward indigenization of procurement. So he has powers over procurement for the most of the defense equipment. So why not promote indigenization? He has that power. Okay. So handling modern threats like cyber warfare, space-based warfare, etc. Now he has under him 3 service chiefs. He has powers to give directives to three service chiefs, because that is the mandate of his post. He has powers over them. Because he has powers over them, he can give holistic advice. He can integrate them in order to handle modern threats. The modern threats are not fought on the battlefield. They happen over the internet, they happen over the space and so on. So how do we handle these issues? This can be something that he can look at. Okay, and this is a challenge that he faces. Okay, so that is a good thing. Handling border issues, amicable with Pakistan and China. I don't know what he meant here. Handling border issues amicably. That could have been his choice of words. Amicably with Pakistan and China. So that is a good point. And then he's telling me that you have to make sure that he has to make sure that neglected theater command forces get proportionate benefits and importance. So this Andaman and Nicobar theater command, it is important to equip it properly, because it is the closest command to the Indian Ocean region, in which India wants to be a net security provider, and it has been a stated goal of the country. We have come up with several policies: maritime security review strategy, and you have the policy of deep blue navy. We are wanting to come up with a blue economy. All these things are basically hinging towards what? Towards the creation of an IOR which is very close to us. Okay, in which India maintains its domination, in which India maintains peace. That is what India wants, and having a good theater command in Andaman and Nicobar is quintessential for that, and he has to take that forward. Okay. What has he cut down, by the way? He probably wanted to talk about paramilitary, but I want you all to go back and see if paramilitary comes under CDS. Does CDS have powers over paramilitary? I want you all to talk about that. And what under what ministry do we have paramilitary affairs? Is it Ministry of Home Affairs or Ministry of Defense? This is a prelims question, by the way. You can look at it and put it down in the comment section. Okay, so what has he done so far? He has talked about certain facts of CDS, and then he moved forward and talked about the problems in the present structure, problems in the previous structure, which necessitated the post of the CDS or the Chief of Defense Staff. And now he says that now that we have instituted this position, what are the problems this person will face? And next he is supposed to talk about the measures which he is talking about. He says he wants to go for a restructuring of armed forces into theater commands for better integration with other services. That is a good point. And then he has to make sure that acquisitions do not surpass capital allocations, okay, so that we don't run into deficits. That is a good point. And then you have to take forward the presence in IOR in consonance with Blue Water Navy, maritime security strategy, etc. So he has only given 3 points, but they are 3 really good solid points, so this should be sufficient. This is an overall comprehensive answer. Let's see if we can add value to this, but before we do that, we will look at the conclusion. Creation of CDS is a nascent first step for defense preparedness in modern times of warfare. Good. So we have to follow it up with empowering him with adequate powers and responsibility. So this is basically a futuristic conclusion which shows optimism, which shows positivism. So what it's basically telling me is that you have come up with CDS, but this does not solve all the problems. You have to sufficiently empower him with powers as well as responsibilities. Okay, so this is a good answer, overall good answer. He has come up with good points under each of his subheadings. Internal security may I expect a diagram, but in this particular context, because it is a purely theoretical question, there has not been a diagram. But if you want to be creative, you could draw a diagram. Let's see if I can make a diagram. See, this CDS is above all the 3 services. So यहाँ पे you write army, and then you write navy, and then you write air force. Okay, so that so this has become a very simple diagram. Now we'll move forward and write government here. So what it does, he's basically pointing out 2 things in this. CDS is above these 3 things, and then CDS maintains connect with the government. Under government, you write Ministry of Defense or Department of Defense, Ministry of Defense. Diagram banana is not a rocket science. You just have to sit down and think about it. Whenever you write a question, think about a flow chart you could put, think about a hub and spoke model you could put, think about a tabular format that you could put, and once you push your mind towards these things, it is easy to do that. We have evolved this in what? In less than 20 seconds. I sat down and I evolved this in less than 20 seconds, and you all can do the same. All you have to do is just push yourself, okay? So this is a good answer. We have completed the answer, and this should be the discussion for the day. The question for Monday will be put up in the Telegram group. Okay, thank you for your participation. I'll meet you all on Monday.